has made this little box that makes NDi work properly. So it makes it work, something like that.
Yep.
So I came in here first and spoke to Dan and said, I'm interested in looking at what NewTek are producing and with their box, and he said, hey, we're just about ready to release and get this thing going. So to explain what NDi is first, and what use does it have for live production?
Yeah, for sure, and it's probably worth sort of going through where the products are and that kind of thing as well, because some people may have heard of BirdDog. We've been talking about it for a while, so I'll talk about NDi first and then go into that.
Yeah.
So NDi was developed by NewTek. It's a way of sending video over an IP network. So instead of using traditional SDi or HDMi or even wireless, it's sending it over a switched computer network. The good parts about NDi is the bandwidth that it uses. It means that it can fit on a standard gigabit Ethernet. You don't need to use 10 gig or 40 gig like you would with something like a SMPTE 2010 or 2020 video formats. It also has a whole bunch of extra information in there, or metadata. So when you're working on an SDi cable or HDMI, it's single directional, the video goes in and you get it at the other end. With IP, you've got the benefit of having some return information coming back. So with NDi, you're not only sending video over the network, but you're also getting tally information back and other bits of information. And it's about how you pick up the user.
Talk and talk back?
Well, technically you can. Audio can travel independently of video, so there's no reason why you couldn't have audio come back. And I'll get to that. We have a headphone jack on here, which is for some future work. So on top of that, NDi is a very fast way of sending video over. So it's around about a frame of latency end to end, which is really very good considering you're going over a standard network. And good for any type of live production, even if you're doing big screen events where you have video behind talent. At a frame latency, it's really very good. And then from there, basically what we've done is taken that and said, well, wouldn't it be good if you have that on a camera? So NDi is available in a bunch of different products. There's NewTek products, there's Livestream, there's Telestream, vMix, and a whole bunch of manufacturers like Panasonic have jumped onto it as well. But all of those are kind of infrastructure or server-based products. We thought that really with IP, the most benefit is going to be you get it as close to the glass as possible. So if you want it as close to the glass on the camera, and as close to the glass at the other end where you're putting it out. And that way you have the most flexibility. IP gives you ultimate flexibility because you're with a completely switched network. You're not having to go through that hub and spoke video router type setup. It's available anywhere, the internet effectively. So with that concept in mind, that's where we came up with the idea of BirdDog around 18 months ago, just as NDi was announced. The trick is that all these other devices run on Intel processors. The NDi developers kit, or the availability of NDi, is around using a computer to process video.
Yes.
To get something small to go on the back of a camera or use not much power, so you don't need fans and big power supplies, that doesn't make any sense. You can't put a server inside a box this size. So that time that we've taken over the last 18 months is about getting NDi into a hardware compression codec. And that's not really a predictable thing as far as how long it's going to take. It's not working until it's working. Admittedly, we thought we were ready several months ago, and there's still more and more things that have to come into that. But we are here and we're showing it, it's working, and NDi is now available in a portable box. So on to what this is. We've got HDMI and SDi as video inputs, and Ethernet as an output. And that's the primary task of this. You take your video off your camera, process it into NDi, and then receive that somewhere else. The Ethernet connection is gigabit with power over Ethernet as well, so we can take the power externally. There's no need for a wall wart and trying to work out how to get that power. Although you can also power it if you want to via DC or DTAP on your camera setup. So when we ship, which the pre-orders are shipping as of next week, that will encode SDi and HDMI to SDi. On top of that, we have tally information on the front as well. So when you're on program or preview, the screen on the front here will reflect that with either a full screen red or full screen green to show you whether you're live or not.
You've got an instance, I'll just point it up there.
Yeah.
So you've got an instance of...
Here's an example of it. So if you can see there, it says PGM or program at the moment, and that's because we're looking at the video on the program bus of this TriCaster. If I take it off and not look at it anywhere else, you can see that's instantly switched to Cam 1, which is the station name of this particular BirdDog. So that's this BirdDog would be called Cam 1. Equally, if I switch to preview, you can see there it's switched across to PVW or preview. And that's just letting us know where we are. So you can see very quickly if I switch between program and preview, or nothing at all. that's all instantaneous and works directly with the NDi protocol, and so it's not a configuration I've made in the TriCaster, nor is it a configuration I'd make in any other system. It's part of the NDi protocol that we just pick up and use. In the shipping version, rather than saying PGM and pre-VW, that's just for showing it to show, it'll be full screen red and green, so it's easier for talent to see, which is more traditional tele workplace. After that, we actually have the hardware in here is capable of doing a whole lot more, but we decided we needed to ship this thing, as I'm sure a lot of people are agreeing with. So we have a bunch of firmware updates. So it's not, again, most SDi gear, when you buy it, it does what it does forever.
Yes.
With NDi being a software-defined kind of protocol, we're able to add more and more things. And so this box is designed to do a whole lot more. And namely, that will be in the future firmware updates for decoding, so we can receive NDi back in. And that's simultaneous, so we can take NDi out of this box and receive at the same time, which is really handy for cameramen if they want to return feed to make sure they're framing up their shots. And we'll also be able to do two things at once, and that will include being able to encode HDMi and SDi simultaneously. Now they're firmware updates, so it's not what we're shipping now, but it's what the hardware's capable of, so it's sort of protecting the investment down the track. So that's kind of where we're at.
Australian price?
I'll start off with the US price, which is $895 US,
right,
which works out to be around about the $1,200 mark in Australia. So, yeah.
Okay, and so everyone can work that through.
Yep.
But anything else with that?
That's basically where we're at. There is actually a little USB port on the top here, which is really handy for some fixed installations where you might have a PTZ or a hothead or something that needs to be controlled externally. So we have a little adapter that takes that and breaks it out to Ethernet again. So you can control the PTZ camera with only one cable going into the BirdDog and then going back out to your PTZ. Okay. So for installation, it means less cables and less complexity. So probably one last point to talk about is NDi 3, which has just been announced by NewTek. NDi 3 has a number of new features, one of them being multicast, which means that you can receive NDi on many more devices without overflowing network capabilities, so it's a more efficient way of distributing out to more devices. And that can work really well for big installations, maybe sports stadiums and things where there's a lot of screens that want to see the same thing. And there's also a high efficiency version of NDi that's been announced, which is NDi HX. And that's an extension of NDi, so there's still the high quality NDi that we've seen so far with very low latency and excellent picture quality. Still stands, and then there's HX, which is their high efficiency version of NDi, which is more about getting video over more compressed networks. So it might be Wi-Fi or a network that's further away. And so that image quality, it's not magic. Something has to happen to make it fit through a smaller pipe. So the compression is more aggressive, and also because of the result of that, there's a bit more latency in there. But it does enable additional workflows with NDi, which are really powerful. So NDi can spread further out into a production.
So one question that comes up is, NewTek announced their Wi-Fi thing.
Yep.
How does that differ from BirdDog?
Fundamentally, it's exactly that, NDi HX. So the NewTek boxes are NDi HX only, so it's that more compressed version of NDi. It still has the advantages with NDi as far as being able to pick it up and use it on any NDi compatible box, so it's still a very powerful tool. But it's about getting that video over long distances, perhaps even over the internet or cell phones. And there's a cost to that in terms of image quality, but then there's a convenience that has. So effectively where we see things work, and realistically I think if people use them in the wrong place, there may be some disappointment, is a BirdDog is designed to be on your primary camera to take video and use that as your primary part of your production. It's a camera back to use in a studio or in a live production. The NewTek, the new NDi Spark products are designed to extend that out further, so you might have some additional cameras that are in a really awkward spot where you might be able to get a 4G modem into it and feed it in. So it could be even potentially on a drone, or it could be in another building, and it gives you more abilities to get video in, but it's not really designed as your primary source, if you know what I mean. So, yeah.
And there was one other with that. I'm done.
You're done? There we go.
I'm done. So.